Hi, everybody. Gil Martin here, and welcome to the very first episode of the Packers Post Daily. We're going to be here every day discussing the Green Bay Packers in depth, both what's going on now and maybe once a week, a little bit about the history of the team. Today, we're going to start off by taking a look at some players who are on the roster bubble as we head into the final preseason game Saturday against the Baltimore Ravens. And again, all of these articles that we discuss, everything that we're talking about, you can find it at thepackerspost.com, which is our website. So a lot of the players who are facing roster indecision, that they're on the bubble, these are guys who are very often facing a numbers crunch. And we'll start with the numbers crunch situation at tight end. There's a couple of players at tight end who are fighting for roster spots. One of them is Tyler Davis, who missed all of 2023 due to an injury he suffered in the preseason last year. Now, the coaching staff has always been high on Tyler Davis. He has never really done a great job during the regular season on offense, but he is a core special teams player. And the question becomes, do the Packers stick with him for his special teams prowess, or do they look for a younger alternative at the tight end position? And in my mind, I think you have to look for the younger alternative. There are a couple of them, and these are also players who are kind of on the roster bubble. You have Ben Sims, who made the team last year as the third tight end and, looked pretty solid during the limited action that he saw. Sims ended up basically playing in a handful of games. Started one, played in all 17, had 4 catches on 6 targets for 21 yards and a touchdown. Now, 3 of his 4 targets went for first downs. When he got the chance, he did show some potential, had a good preseason last year, and I think he has more upside as a tight end than Tyler Davis does. Also, you have Joel Wilson, who has looked really good both in training camp and in preseason games so far this year. And the thing about Wilson, he's an undrafted free agent. He really hasn't had a chance to, show what he can do in regular season games. And yet, here's a guy out of Central Michigan who all he's done in the preseason, especially in the first preseason game against Cleveland, is move the chains. And, he's got 4 catches for 34 yards so far in the preseason. Was on the practice squad at the end of last year after spending the early part of the year with the Buffalo Bills. To me, here's a guy from the MAC, Central Michigan, 6'4", 242 pounds, and all he does is make plays. Now, the question becomes whether Rich Bisaccia puts his foot down and basically says, hey, I want Tyler Davis. He is the guy I want to have for my special teams. He's a key special teams performer, and I would like him to be on this roster. And he can do that, but only so many times. So to me, Ben Sims, Joel Wilson, Tyler Davis, these are 3 players probably fighting for 2 roster spots, and we'll see which 2 make it, assuming, and it may indeed be a big assumption, that the Packers keep 4 tight ends on the roster. Obviously, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft are the top 2, and then you have these 3 players kind of battling for those last few spots. Another player at a different position who is clearly on the roster bubble right now is offensive tackle Caleb Jones. Now, Jones has been a project, a lot like Yosh Nijman was a project a few years back for the Packers. The coaching staff and the front office, they love his athletic potential. He is the largest player ever to appear in a Packers uniform in a regular season game. Yeah, he played one game, only took a handful of snaps, but at 6'9", 370, if you can get him to hone his technique, the wingspan, the size, the strength, the tools are there. And now, just like they did with Yosh Nijman, they're developing Caleb Jones and hoping he develops into a player who really can, give this team some depth at offensive tackle. Well, Jones has been dealing with a lot of injuries, and it has definitely set him back in training camp. He missed the first week or so of camp, and he's been sort of playing catch up ever since. Did not look great against Denver in the second preseason game. Not that a lot of players did, but Jones right now kind of in a bit of a fight for one of those spots at offensive tackle. Right now, we know that, the starting left tackle, barring injury, Rasheed Walker, the starting right tackle, barring injury, Zach Tom. Then you've got guys like Andre Dillard, who is also kind of on the roster bubble, who has looked better on the left side than on the right. He is kind of they brought him in to be the swing tackle, and he is more likely than not to be the swing tackle. But then you got guys like Kadeem Telfort and Luke Tenuta, who appear at this juncture to be a little bit ahead of Caleb Jones on the depth chart. Travis Glover also can play tackle, and as can Jordan Morgan. Now, we know the Packers like to have offensive linemen who can play multiple positions, and that may limit the ability of Caleb Jones to make the team. I get the feeling that if Caleb Jones is not on the initial 53, the Packers will once again try to get him on the practice squad. The question is whether or not there is enough room there for him, and whether another team might want to claim the former Indiana star and make, try to develop him for their roster. Offensive guard Royce Newman also definitely fits into this bubble category. And it's not looking good right now for Royce Newman. And I, for one, have to say that Newman has been a disappointment for the Green Bay Packers. He is now in his fourth season. He started 16 games as a rookie. And since then, in the last 2 years combined, he has only started 8. And those 8 starts have really been when injuries hit. And unfortunately, Newman, he's an average run blocker at best, but in pass protection, which is something that the Packers value more than run blocking overall, got to protect Jordan Love, got to protect the franchise quarterback. Realistically, Newman has had difficulty with blitz pickups and stunts. And unless he can be more consistent, he just does not look like a player who is going to get the job done for the Packers if you have to have him in the lineup extensively. Now, we know Elton Jenkins is one starter. Probably, if he's healthy, Jordan Morgan starts at right guard. You have Sean Ryan, who's looking more and more like the swing interior lineman, kind of that Lucas Patrick role from a couple of years ago, where, he's gotten reps at center. He's gotten reps at both left and right guard. And then you need other depth players, whether it's Donovan Jennings, whether it's Lecitus Smith or Royce Newman. Right now, in my mind, Newman is probably not going to make the roster. He just continues to struggle. The one thing we haven't seen from Royce Newman that I think has been extremely disappointing to a lot of Packer fans is progression. Usually guys will struggle as a rookie. Most rookies do have an adjustment period when they make the jump from college to the National Football League. Players are bigger, faster, better technique, more, these are the best football players in the world. Whereas even at a major college program like Alabama or Michigan, maybe 3 or 4 players on that roster might be starting caliber NFL level players. Uh, right now, we haven't seen Royce Newman take a noticeable jump to make a noticeable improvement from his rookie year to his second year to his third year. Now we're in the fourth year. Yeah, this is the last year of his rookie contract. Maybe you keep Royce Newman on the roster only because you want someone with experience to be available. But overall, I just don't see Royce Newman as being somebody who is one of the better, best 9 or 10 offensive linemen for this team to keep. And under those circumstances, I think his roster chances are shrinking with each passing week, and we'll see whether or not he ultimately makes the team. At running back, I had Emanuel Wilson on this list initially, but due to injuries to to A.J. Dillon and Marshawn Lloyd, it is looking more and more like Emanuel Wilson will start the season on the 53-man roster. And Wilson is a great story. He was an undrafted free agent who nobody expected to make the Packers roster last year, but Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst absolutely needed to include him on the roster after he led the NFL in rushing yards in the preseason in 2023. He's got good burst. He reads the holes well. The key for Emanuel Wilson is to do the things that running backs need to do in Green Bay when they're not carrying the football. So what does that include? You're talking about catching passes out of the backfield. I think Wilson can do that adequately. And the more reps he gets, the more he improves, the better he'll get at it. That's not the big worry when it comes to Emanuel Wilson. But the other thing, pass protection and blitz pickup, and yeah, they're kind of overlapping and related. Getting the running backs to be able to do that becomes more important. Again, Jordan Love as your franchise quarterback is, vital, keeping him healthy, giving him time to do the things he does well. All of that is very important. And if your running back, who's going to see actual playing time behind Josh Jacobs, can't do those things well, it's not a guy you want to have a major role with. Now, if Marshawn Lloyd is able to prove he can do those things and gets healthy, well, we're talking about, again, a shakier roster spot for Emanuel Wilson. If A.J. Dillon, who is a veteran, who really does pass protect well, if he's healthy again and he suffered a stinger injury, the second stinger he's had in about the last 8 or 9 months, he had one late last season against Minnesota, did not play the season finale or either of the 2 playoff games last year. As a result, if Dillon returns and Lloyd is healthy enough to be on the active roster for week 1, then the Packers have a decision to make. Do you have 4 running backs on the 53-man roster, or do you try to stash Emanuel Wilson on the practice squad? I get the feeling Wilson is the kind of guy that another team will take a chance on. So, you may end up putting either Dillon or Lloyd, or worst case scenario, both on the injured reserve to start the season. And then as a result, Emanuel Wilson makes the roster. But we'll see. It's a tough choice because Wilson, he played well in the first preseason game against Cleveland and even against Denver in a game where almost nobody on the offense looked particularly good. According to Pro Football Focus, Wilson still gained a lot of yards after first contact. So the main problem was poor run blocking by the offensive line. That has been an issue for the Packers for a long, long time, last 2-3 years at least. And, these were the backups and third string guys by the time Wilson was in the game. You hope that the starters are able to do a better job than the backups, but we'll see how it all plays out and whether or not Emanuel Wilson's performance was enough to get him a roster spot this year. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some wide receivers. Last year, the Packers kept 6 wide receivers. If they do so again, though, well, there's 3 guys going for 2 spots. You have Bo Melton, Grant DuBose, and Malik Heath. Now, Melton and Heath made the roster last year. Melton started on the practice squad, was activated later in the season when injuries hit, and ended up being the first Packers wide receiver to go over 100 yards in a game. He did it late in the season. To me, he's such a great story. He works hard. He blocks well and has upside potential. I would like to see him on the roster. But of the 3 on this list, I think Bo Melton has more security. That's not to say he's not on the bubble, but I think he has the best chance of ending up on the roster out of all 3 of these players. Meanwhile, Malik Heath, another undrafted free agent who just was so consistent last year in training camp, making plays every day in the preseason, making plays, making catches, moving the chains. He earned a roster spot that maybe was a little bit unexpected. To me, it was great to see Malik Heath on the roster. He was the best receiver that played for the Packers against Denver. Now, that's a low bar because, again, nobody really shined, but Heath led the team in receptions and, made some good plays. But the thing is this, Grant DuBose, last year, 7th-round pick, injured for most of training camp, wasn't able to get even a chance to really show what he could do. This year, Grant DuBose, after spending last year on the practice squad once he was healthy, really shining. He has been this year's Malik Heath, showing what he could do, making big plays in training camp, in preseason games, especially week 1 against Cleveland. It would be difficult to let Grant DuBose go. You might be able to stash him on the practice squad again, but, could the Packers keep 7 wide receivers? I doubt it, but it's possible depending on whether or not any of these guys really help out on special teams as well. But these are guys on the bubble, and how they do in the final preseason game Saturday against the Baltimore Ravens at Lambeau Field, 12 o'clock noon Central Time, how they do in that game is going to be vital as to whether or not they are able to make the 53-man roster. Those are our offensive side of the ball bubble players. We'd love to hear what you think about it. You can certainly comment in our comment section here and let us know what you think. How many of these guys do you think will make the roster, and which players on our list do you think will and will not make the Packers roster? We'd love to hear what you think. In my mind right now, out of the guys who are on this list, I kind of feel like DuBose will make the roster. I think Bo Melton will make the roster. I think Emanuel Wilson will make the roster. And I think Tyler Davis will make the roster. Ben Sims or Joel Wilson will probably be on the final 53, but I'm still not sure which. I would lean toward Sims and Wilson, but I get the feeling that Brian Gutekunst, Matt LaFleur, and especially Rich Bisaccia are going to give Tyler Davis a roster spot. So that is our first show. We'd love to hear your feedback. Again, we're going to be here every day, Monday through Friday, and then after games as well, to talk about all the latest Green Bay Packers news. And again, you can read our articles and our archived articles at thepackerspost.com, where we give you in-depth daily coverage of the Green Bay Packers. I'm Gil Martin. Great to have you here. Thank you for watching the very first episode of the Packers Post Daily. We'll be back tomorrow.